Hi, we're here with the Black Western Heritage and Culture Project, and I am here with Miss Mollie Taylor Stevenson Jr. How you doing today, Miss Mollie?
I'm fine, and you?
I'm
So
all
glad to
right.
be here.
Oh, I'm glad to be here too. Where are we right now?
We are in Houston, Texas, on Alameda Road. This was the original site of where my mother was born, Mollie Taylor Stevenson Sr., who I'm named after. This area we have designated as part of the American Cowboy Museum, the stationery, but we also have a traveling exhibit where we go to churches, schools, festivals with actual people to give an oral history, portable boards that we take and spread out of pictures that most people would not see of us, knowing that we had a huge impact in the Western heritage.
That is amazing. So you said your mother was born here. Um, where is here exactly? We're at the Taylor Stevenson Ranch.
Yes, an area of the Taylor Stevenson Ranch. The address is 11822 Alameda Road, Houston, Texas. I must clarify that this particular area, with about 3.5 acres out of many other acres, I don't designate how many it actually is in the ranch properties, but that part is used for the tours and the history. I have other siblings that reside here, and they choose not to preserve all of it, as my husband and I, Alicia Scott and I, do, so I respect that privacy. And we also ask that when you come to make an appointment or call me at my phone, 713-478-9677. I'll repeat that, 713-478-9677. Or my husband's phone number is 713-884-7460.
How did this ranch come to be in your family?
It came about from my great-grandfather, who was E.R. Taylor, a white gentleman, and his dad purchased a slave from him, for him, whose name was Ann Taylor. They lived as a family. They couldn't marry because interracial marriage was not recognized in Texas, but he could leave his property to her. And the mulatto children, mulatto was part black, part white. And some believed that if one had one drop of black, you were considered African American. So over the years, from E.R. and Ann, there were 6 children that I recall all of them. The sons, the daughters were Pinky, who was my favorite great aunt. Pinky Taylor, Nettie Taylor, Will, Bert, Sam, and Major were the 6 children. And from that 6, it was only 3. That was mother, Mollie Taylor Stevenson Sr., and her 2 cousins, Edward and Howard. As they became adults, the 2 cousins wanted nothing to do or didn't want to reside here on the property, so they moved outside of Texas to New York and New Mexico, which meant that mother was the glue and the grits of the ranch with the families. And my dad, of course, Benjamin Stevenson, majored in Tuskegee in animal science, and he brought a lot to the table in knowing about the animals, agriculture. Mother inherited the land, and they worked as a team. And they had 5 children, another daughter that they considered a natural child. And we all lived out here on the ranch. So over the years, that's how the property resolved to the various families. And we've been very fortunate to maintain it in God's grace, that we could live here and be close to the land. Because so many people have lost their property in not living on it or coming back. And when that happens, others just come in, they'll take it, they don't know what's going on. People don't pay their taxes. And the work is hard, hot, and dirty. So they resort to something else.
So your great aunts and uncles Pinky and
Nettie.
and Nettie and Will and Sam and Nate. Those were the 6 children?
Of E.R. and Ann, that was the 6, right.
And you knew a lot about them. You got
Oh,
to
I
meet them.
recall them well. When they passed, I was in junior high school and high school, so I had vivid memories of them.
Did they ever tell you what it was like living on the ranch?
Not too much. The major one would have been on Pinky, who was my favorite of all the six children, because she was very grounded into horses, cattle. People would see her walking back and forth on Alameda and thought that she was not of sound mind, which she was. Pinky didn't want to be bothered, and she lived back off in the woods. She was a hermit. I remember these overalls that she had on, an old tattered hat. But once we spoke to her, she was extremely warm. We didn't talk a lot about her. And she didn't say much to us, maybe 20 minutes or so, and that was it. Aunt Pinky was gone. And she had this massive garden, huge dogs. I so recall those dogs that she had. And Mother had a home built for her after she had fallen. And the house is still here on the property. And Pinky had 10 nurses around the clock for 3 years. Her money, not Medicare, Medicaid, or no, this was her money that they were paid weekly. And Aunt Pinky lived to be 106. There was an article done on her in Ebony magazine. And again, she was one of my favorites. We have a picture of Aunt Pinky. This is how I remember her. Most of the Taylors were tall, stately people, a good 6 feet, 6'2". Aunt Pinky was tall and slender. I also have one of her high button shoes, a very narrow shoe that Aunt Pinky rarely wore, because I recall her being in rubber boots walking on Alameda. And you could see the hat that she had on, the rope, like overalls. And that was her. That was Aunt Pinky. And again, this was from the files of Ebony magazine. It's unfortunate that I don't think Ebony exists anymore. That was founded by the Johnson family. So we were proud to have gotten this. It's a funeral program here. You got it? Let me see this a second.
You talked a little bit about how hard it was for people to keep their land in their family. How do you think your great aunts and uncles and great grandmother did it?
Well, one way my great aunts and uncles were able to keep their land is that they lived on it, or they would come back to it. Out of the 6, 5 lived out here on the property. Uncle Will lived in 3rd Ward, huge house now. We're talking about 2020, the year 2020 now. It's still a big house. And when, I guess in their heyday of the 30s through the 60s, one aunt taught music. And we all took music lessons from Aunt Irene. After that, it was a hobby house for senior citizens that would go to. And it still exists. And the main reason they were able to keep their land is that they were very close to it. They loved it. And I have this picture that I'm holding that would designate some of the history of our Western culture, going back to Africa to begin with, that we were people that raised animals, we tamed them, huge, mean animals like elephants, tigers. The Maasai could walk around herds of cattle and goats very calmly and not beat them, as in some cases you might see them. When the slave traders realized these skills, they said, well, hey, they know a lot about horse and cattle. Why don't we get some of them? And they could come work the land in these various countries. So the slave trade began from the west coast of Africa to the various countries. It's still the most shark-infested area in the world from the slave trade. Jacques Cousteau, the famous oceanography person that studied, recognized this years ago, that the shark-infested areas is the thickest from that slave trade. And that would designate how cruel it was. And for our people to have even made the voyage was an indication that we are a strong, proud person. You know, if you shackled together, and shackles are pieces of iron where you could barely move for days at a time. Many died, they were thrown overboard. Some said, well, no, if they take these shackles off of him and I get a loose, I'm not going. Many just hopped off their ships. Babies born, cruelty. And some may say with the Holocaust, yeah, it was bad. I don't disagree with it, but not nearly as bad as the slave trade, with what we had to withstand. So those that made the voyage were the strongest of persons to have come. And I hold this picture. This was Tina the cow, and we raised Tina in the old house as a little bitty calf. Her mom died, and she was fed on a big bottle. It's about this long with a nipple. And Tina would love to be brushed under her chin and under her stomach. And she was about this tall, and she was still coming to the house. We said, no, Tina, you're getting a little big. You have to stay outside more. But this was Tina, and she's buried here in the area of the ranch. And Tina lived to be a good 12 years old, which was an average age for cattle.
I love how you connected, you know, our African culture to our African American roots, and
oh, you have to.
In I don't want to say cowpoke culture, but in Western heritage and culture.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, this is a black-owned ranch, and were there a lot of other black ranchers for your family members to interact with and to do business with, or did they feel kind of isolated?
The only ones that I readily recall that we interacted with was the Jackson Ranch in Anahuac. And we highly respected O.C. Jackson and his family for all that they had done with hundreds of heads of cattle. They had oil on it, as we did and still do now. And of course, the ranch hands are such that helped us to maintain it. People now deceased like Leo Frank, who helped my grandfather, Major Taylor, mother and daddy, Ben and Mollie Stevenson, myself. So that was like 3 generations of people that he assisted with. And nowadays, there are few black ranches. Again, I don't be repetitive in how we have left our land or let it go, but they are minimal. And it's unfortunate, because once the land is gone, you won't be getting it back. It's either too expensive or the next generation doesn't want it. And there's a group called the Landowners of Texas that we network with in learning ways of what you could do with your land. Be it some type of crop that you might grow. We hear now about the mobile homes, since people don't want to fly because of this virus. They want to travel by motor home. I met a gentleman at a conference that has a mobile home facility that's doing grand theft. We've written so much more in the last few months because of the virus. And they'll even get larger in his business. I'd love to mention timber, trees. Some don't think that because, this is really overgrown out here. Look at this. It is money in timber. You've got to have somebody come in and cut the timber for you. But be there when they do. Because they can come in, cut the timber, you don't know they have been there and gone, and sell it. It's all types of wood. Areas like, the Sienna Plantation, Montgomery. The Sienna Plantation is south of us, like out 521. Montgomery, that has lakes and ponds. Blacks were told, well, this is bottomland. You can't do too much with this because it floods. And with the construction, there were natural man-made lakes that were there. So you have the fishing, the hunting, that's natural. I think somebody earlier we were talking about a Mr. Melanson, Warren Melanson, and the facility that he has with cattle and deer and entertainment. I'm very proud to know that about him. I wish it was more that did. Oh, and for ladies in ranching, I would encourage them in having land that you lease it out. Don't sell it. Lease it out. Find out if there are oil royalties. For hay, someone can come in and cut and bale the hay for you. They may sell it and you get the tax write-off, or if you want to sell some of the hay, you would have that option. But don't sell it, lease it. Okay?
Were there issues on the farm having to deal with being a black-owned ranch?
Oh yeah, it's just right now. What is this? July 2020, and some of the funding that black farmers and ranchers were not able to get, or it was minimal what they did receive. That's always been the block. Whereas others would be paid for crops that were either damaged or they didn't grow, and we were never in the loop of even being able to bid on it. So yeah, there were issues, tremendous issues there with the resources.
Your mom. What was your mom's experience like growing up here?
Oh, growing up here, mother loved it. And she knew the land front and back and made it fun for us. Especially, well, mother and daddy both. Little black kids in the late 50s, going into just before integration in the 60s, early 60s. This was a haven for black kids to come to because of segregation. They couldn't go to parks or theaters, and mother and daddy would invite them here for huge picnics, truckloads of picnics. Children would come for picnics. And this may be their first exposure to the outdoors at that extent. I was looking at the kids today that came out, and they are buck wild. They want to run, and they're running in a safe place. Because so many times the parks are dangerous. You don't know who's out there or what. And there was also Sky Ranch, which was an aviation school across the street from where we are. A group that was called the Bronze Eagles, who were the mechanics to the Tuskegee Airmen. You saw the picture, movie picture, Red Tails, about the Tuskegee Airmen. They never lost a plane. Well, the mechanics that kept those planes in the air safely had an aviation school across the street. They had gotten a government contract, but they couldn't fly into the white airports. And mother was approached by Hewlin White, who was at Tuskegee, and that was a connection, because daddy finished from Tuskegee. So Hewlin White, that we call Pappy, came and talked to mother and daddy and said, well, look, can you lease us some land to build this aviation school? And mother said, yeah, we can. And that's where Sky Ranch existed. Mother named it. The planes came from the sky and landed on the ranch. And as the children came out for the picnics, there would be plane rides that Pappy and also A. White, who was the first licensed African-American pilot in Texas. And A would take the kids up and ride them around. There was a rodeo pen that my granddad had near Sky Ranch, so the children could look down on the ranch. And we had one day out of the year that we could go to a park near the Astrodome. That was Playland Park. And that one day was Juneteenth, June the 19th, the day that slaves were freed in Texas. Lincoln had signed the proclamation June the 19th, 1862. But we didn't get the word in Texas until June the 19th, 1863, 2.5 years later. because the communication was poor. The farmers intended not to let them know. So that was some of the memories with Mother, and just how shrewd she was with handling the business of attorneys. Some were good, some misled her. But remember too that she was mainly by herself or with Daddy, because the other aunts and uncles, they had theirs. They had it. And Mother, she was a fighter and could work, man, she could work you down. And even in Mother's latter years, I think she was in a wheelchair for about 9 years. It would be slow at a constant pace. And I recall when it was tax time, she would sit at the kitchen table, go through her papers hour after hour. And she would sit there until it was completed. She kept massive files, all paper. Before Mother died, it was the beginning of the fax machine, which she, no technology, but limited technology. Not because she couldn't, but she was brought up in another era of a lot of paper and memory. And that's how I am with paper. It's not funny. I have about 3 offices here with a lot of paper. But I know where every sheet is, front and back. And I get somewhat perturbed with other siblings when they say, well, can you find it? I said, look, y'all got computers and all this technology and children. No, I don't feel like looking for it today, maybe another time. Keep up with your own, I have enough on me to do. And as fast as this pace is, I knew I've got to do better. And of course, Scott, my husband, has been very helpful. Elisha Scott Jr., he's named after his dad. He was from a ranching family also.
Your mother was a Fisk Jubilee singer?
She played the organ for the Fisk Jubilee Singers.
And where is Fisk?
Fisk is in Nashville, Tennessee. And we were so honored to have taken her back to Fisk University for her 75th reunion. We have a picture of some of the other classmates, there's maybe 70 or so on a picture. It's the picture that's right here. Yeah, that picture. This is a picture of Mother and some of her classmates. And out of this group, there were only 4 that still lived, Mother and 3 others.
What made her come back home?
Come back home?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Mother never really left other than college at Fisk. I had gone to New York to model, didn't like it at all because it was too many people and they were crowded, they didn't speak, it wasn't enough brass. So I moved to Kansas City, Missouri, where my dad was from. And that's where my first husband and I met, Tom Neely. And we lived here with Mother we were married 11 years. And Tom saw the vision. Where we were with the cattle and the horses and all, that was thicket. And when Tom and I would come back for, spend time with Mother, and then we would go for a walk with Tina, the cow. She would walk with us to the back pastures and then come back and say, people don't see this often. You could do tours here and have entertainment. And when Tom and I divorced, that's when I put more of my time and energy into developing the vision, because I saw it too. I always wanted to come back to Texas because, where's my hat? Here it is. Okay, here's my hat right here. Because I love Texas. Here we go. And, little by little, when Mother had the money, we would bring in a man in a bulldozer to clear the land. And it started small, and then we went further and further back into clearing the property. Mother was always there with me. And the latter part of the day is what she really enjoyed. We would either sit out in the yard or ride. She said, baby, let's go ride the pastures and see what's going on. And I recall one incident. We had about 3 busloads of children, like in June. If you've been in Texas in June, it is hot from noon on. So after tours, her mother and I would come back inside and rest until the day cooled off. And she saw these trucks going across the road. They shouldn't be there. And she said, okay. Mother cursed a little bit. Oh, hell, baby, come on. I said, well, where are we going, Mother? I'm tired. I've been with those little children. Now we're going to see what this truck, what they're doing. And as we drove over there, we found out that they had been drilling. We knew nothing about it. They had started drilling a pipeline illegally. And that's the importance of you being on your land. It's just saying we are here and can look across and see what's happening. And if one isn't present on your property, it's sad. It's really sad.
They were illegally drilling oil on your property?
Yeah.
And what happened?
They just came in. We shut them down. Shut them down.
Was this before or after your family knew there was oil on the property?
Oh, way after.
When
We
did
knew, yeah.
When did your family find out there was oil here?
About 1924,
How did it happen?
24. My great granddad, E.R. Taylor, was walking and stepped on something that was brown in the ground, and he smoked and threw the cigarette down, and it kept burning. And that's how he found out. And this became the second oldest oil field other than Spindletop, which is near Beaumont in Texas. It still exists, not nearly the production that it had up until the 80s, when there was the oil boom. You know, the prices really dropped. Then the prices picked back up, and then it's back down now, way down. So it fluctuates. That's just nature. It'll eventually change.
It's called Pierce Junction, correct?
Pierce Junction is the name of it.
That is absolutely amazing.
So we're proud to be here. I love it, being on the land. And with Scott, from a ranching family, was an integral part. And he got along well with Mother, too. That was the second thing that meant so much. And he enjoys it.
You both seem to enjoy it. When did you guys decide to start the American Cowboy Museum?
That was in 1988 when we did the initial stages of it. And as we traveled to other museums, like the huge museum in Oklahoma City, the National Western Heritage Museum is the largest in the nation. We would go there. The National Cowgirl Museum is another. We saw very few pictures of black cowboys or any representation. And when we came back, we just used ideas, bits and pieces from here and there, and put together our dream, which the vision that we have now is to have like a motorhome where we could travel with the exhibit. One motorhome that we could travel in, a second motorhome that we would actually live in and travel with the other. And with the virus, it appears that motorhomes will be extremely profitable and popular in the years to come, because people just aren't ready to start flying again.